Welcome to Recruiter Wins, your bite-sized 15-minute podcast with your host, Zach Gallinger. This is the show where every guest answers one simple question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win. You'll hear everything from gut-wrenching candidate conversations to game-changing business development wins. Real stories with lessons you can actually use in your next search.
Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Recruiter Wins. My name is Zach Gallinger, and I'm the founder of Talent Hero Media, a digital marketing agency that works exclusively with recruiters. In this podcast, we sit down with a highly successful recruiting expert to ask them a single question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win. Our first guest is Matt Erhard, managing partner at Summit Search Group, an experienced recruiter who is now in his 14th year of business. Summit is a Canadian search firm that operates across the country in a wide variety of industries. So welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate you having me on.
Of course. All right. So as I said in the intro, this is a simple podcast concept. I'm just going to ask you one question and we'll take it from there. So to start, tell me about your biggest recruiting win.
Well, great question. I think in 14 years, it took me a while to kind of hone in on something that would be relevant and interesting. And in 14 years of recruitment, we've seen a lot of highs, a lot of wins, and a lot of lows. That's one in particular situation or placement that I think of right away that is definitely something that still sits with me because I still have a working relationship with this client. Is a number of years ago, there was a client that, not a client at the time, they were somebody who I just knew somewhat personally through some business associations. And they owned a commercial cleaning business. So again, not the most exciting or sexiest business to be in. And they were approaching kind of retirement years. So they were looking to take a step back in the business and see what's next in terms of finding somebody to really lead their operations here in Winnipeg. I'm in Manitoba. And so they approached me. We had several conversations. This is the first time they were ever utilizing a search firm. This is the first time they were ever recruiting for a position like this. So we had to conceptualize what that role entailed. Ultimately, we landed on a general manager title and put together a job description for them. And our task was really to go out and find somebody who had some leadership experience, some sales experience, somebody who could run the operation for them while they took a step back and decided what they wanted to do long term with the business. And so situations like that, can be challenging just because, number one, the major hurdle we were up against was the industry. There's not a lot of people clamoring necessarily to get into the commercial cleaning business. And then second of all, finding somebody who would want to join a fairly small entrepreneurial business with, not necessarily a track record of hiring for positions like this. And so we went into the market as we usually do. We connected with candidates. And in particular, a candidate that I had been in touch with in the past was in between employment. And while this individual's background was, again, didn't have industry relevant experience, they came with a lot of combination of sales and leadership experience. But, after meeting them, I think the biggest takeaway was they were very entrepreneurial in what they were looking for. And so I ultimately ended up connecting this candidate with my client, and they moved forward and hired this individual. And now, that's a win, a small win, but I think the biggest win was, fast forward to about 2 years later, in which the partners in the business ended up selling the business to that candidate that we placed in the role. And so that candidate ultimately was general manager and ended up becoming the owner of the business. And so I think, that was definitely one that was very, I think a definite win for us just in terms of, longevity and placing somebody who's going to be in a role for a long time and ultimately become an owner, running the business, growing it, and creating opportunities for other people as well. And so it kind of really makes me think, about our role as recruiters, it's not just plugging holes or filling a role. It's really, seeing someone step into, their potential and knowing that we played even a small part in setting that journey in motion is something that is, really rewarding to see.
All right, well, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm just going to use that sort of as a jumping off point. I've been taking notes and I just kind of want to ask about a few things that I think will help, in terms of just takeaways that, people might, and lessons people might be able to use sort of in their own business. So you mentioned, that you knew the initial person, the owner of the business, you knew them through business associations, right? And I think it's one challenge I think a lot of recruiters have is, how do you find new clients? And of course, there's a variety of channels, but there are also a finite number of channels. And I think for some recruiters, like business associations may not be something that they've explored too much. So I wonder if you sort of tell me a little bit about like how you use business associations to drive new business.
Yeah, well, I think, it's a really good question, and I think you and I have talked a lot about business development over the years, and we've been in a fortunate position where we don't, necessarily do a lot of traditional business development. And when I say traditional business development, I kind of think of, sort of chasing job orders that, are open on the market. And so we don't do a lot of that, but I think where our strengths lies really in our relationship building, and that is through a lot of networking and, a lot of in-person networking as well. And so this particular association that I knew this individual from is a long-standing business association in Winnipeg that has been around for 100 years. And it's an in-person lead generation and networking group in which we have lunch, all 130 members every single Friday. And it's an association I've been part of for 14 years since I've been in the business. And so, that's definitely a source of great leads and potential contacts. And I think the benefit of having some of that in-person just interaction before working with a client really sets you up for success because they trust you. They have an inherent trust. They've gotten to know you in a different capacity. And so when it comes time for them to hire for a position, ultimately they have, full trust in working with you as well. And that's been a huge area for us, so that's one example, but I think we get involved in a lot of local, whether it's community events, nonprofit events, boards, and different things like that, in which we can really get to know people because I think, we all know that people do work with people they like and people they trust. And so it's really about relationship building.
Okay. No, that's a really good tip, I think. I think, in our business as sort of a digital marketing agency, we don't really sort of get into the in-person side of the business, but I do know that there's an opportunity there for a lot of recruiters. I think probably some of them may shy away from that type of sort of those types of events just because it takes a lot of time, they may be scheduled off, off hours, not during your business day. So I think it's nice to hear that like when you do it successfully, it does pay off.
Well, and I think it pays off, but also the digital side is equally important because, once you've met individuals, they're going to check you out online and find out what your story is, what your background is. And so I think, having that digital presence is equally important as well. And yeah, that's, I would say, a combination of those two is predominantly, where we work. And I think that it's really important as well to not look at networking events like, I'm going to leave this event with a job order or something like that, because that's when you can turn people off. I think it's really looking at it as a marathon, the long game, building those relationships and finding ways where you can add maybe other value to those events and then stay top of mind with people so that when they do have a need, they will call you for that.
Right. So I think it's an interesting point because there's this sort of tension sometimes between like, getting someone to know you, but also, getting something out of it at the end. Maybe it's not like an immediate sort of win for you. I mean, in these types of events, when you go to these types of events or participate in these associations, do you ever kind of give a soft sell or do you just sort of hope that somebody who knows you will remember you when it comes time to for them to, hire?
I think a soft sell is still important. I think you need to really share kind of what you do, to make sure that people are reaching out to you for the right reasons as well, so that they're not, not just sending you leads that are potentially not beneficial. And this particular group that I'm part of is specifically a lead generation group. And so we do sell ourselves. We have to present on our business to the entire group every year or two. And so selling yourself in a venue that's set up for that is not exactly seen as negative, but I think it depends on the venue and kind of the event that you're part of.
Right. Okay. No, that's helpful to know. Another point you mentioned in your story is just about how, this business was in commercial cleaning and it's not really a sexy business and, people may not be interested in it. Like when you're sort of faced with that situation and you're trying to find candidates, like how do you position something like that to maybe make it work?
I think you have to really look for what that value proposition is. And in certain cases, it is the industry that our clients are in that is attractive to a lot of candidates. But in a case like this, where, and I'm not saying that, commercial cleaning is a negative business by any means. I just know that it's not an industry that people are necessarily, selecting to go into. I think it's really important to find what the value proposition is for the role itself. And so in this case, I think there was some opportunity of potential ownership. It wasn't really discussed with the candidate initially during some of the initial interviews, but it was shared with them early on in the process. That it could be a possibility. Also, the longevity of the business, the direction that they were taking the business as well in terms of growth, was really attractive to the right person. And so I think it's really important to not just focus on here are the key responsibilities and sharing, are you interested in the job? I think it's really, you have to really identify those unique value propositions that could really pique someone's interest. And then it's really about matching that with the right person as well. I remember working on the search and we had a lot of people turn it down just based on the industry. Just, they didn't even kind of give it a chance because they're like, they just said commercial cleaning is not an area that I was really, wanting to get into. And, but it's really about positioning it, the opportunity for growth and what it could lead to, is ultimately what really helped us secure the right candidate for the role too.
All right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess will be my sort of final question for our chat is, you mentioned that there is not going to be probably somebody here with commercial cleaning experience that was going to be like the right fit. And this candidate didn't have that experience. So like, when do you sort of decide that it's, maybe a reasonable idea to kind of go outside industry experience and try and sell your client on somebody who doesn't have that experience, but is otherwise has the right skills?
I think that, in this particular case, in some ways, they weren't even really interested in somebody from within the industry, which can be common. We often hear clients who say they don't want, really anyone who comes with any baggage or experience. They really want somebody who's fresh and brings some fresh ideas as well, too. And I think, being able to take someone from a completely different industry. This person, I believe, was in transportation before this, and apply some of those principles that they've been successful with in this industry is really what we look for. And, in this case, the candidate, could, for some clients could have come across as maybe a bit too ambitious in terms of what their outlook was in terms of their career, but in the end it was really exactly somebody who's going to take the business to the next level and ultimately get involved in the ownership of the business as well.
All right. Well, I wanted to keep this sort of conversation brief to the point for, everybody's social media attention span. And I think we've done that. So I just want to thank you again, Matt, for coming on and sharing all that very helpful insight.
Thank you, Zach.
Thanks for listening to Recruiter Wins. Please join us again when we ask our next recruiter one simple question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win.